Good afternoon, Miss Johnny. This will be my video lecture in legal aspects in the hospitality and tourism industry. So today we begin with a new topic about uh, the concept of transportation. Transportation will of course entail vehicles, no? And when we talk about vehicles, of course there are different kinds, no? Or anything that will transport you or that will move you around from place to place, no? So when we talk about transportation here, because this is one of the major components in the tourism and hospitality industry, what do you think about transportation? Well, the word transport, no? They have to move you somewhere. Move you somewhere. No? And when they move you, of course, it could either be by land, what else? By sea or water, then by air. But there by air, no? By air, no? And then some would say by rail because of the train, but this falls also under by land, no? Transportation, of course, when you are in the hospitality and tourism industry, you cannot do away with this transportation because this is one of the major components in the hospitality and tourism industry. Being why is this very important in the tourism and hospitality industry? Well, of course, when we talk of the tourism industry, we always talk about movement. We always talk about vacation. We always talk about perks. We always talk about what we call leisure, no, or recreation. And you cannot also consummate all this movement, vacation, perks, recreation without having to use what we call transportation. And as I told you, the types, of course, is by land, by water, by air. Now, there is a concept, a legal concept, which we call common carrier. No? Common carrier. Common carrier. So what does this mean? When we talk of common carrier, the word common is of course related to what we call public. No? Public. Or public convenience. No? This is related to what we call public convenience as opposed to what we call private carrier. Private carrier. No? So when we talk of private carrier, of course, it is for private use or it may be contracted only for a specific or particular purpose. Now, what we should be concerned about is this one, the common carrier, because it is impressed with public interest. No? Now, when we talk of a common carrier, it is a person or a corporation or a partnership engaged in the business of transporting. What do they transport? Engage in the business of transporting. What do they transport, Miss Johnny? Well, of course, people, things, or even news. No? So, this one, a common carrier is one who is habitually engaged in the business of transporting. What do they transport? People, things, or even news. No? So because of this, because you are a common carrier and your business is impressed with what we call public interest, it is required, no, that you have to be very, very careful. It is required that you have to be very, very careful in transporting passengers, things, and news. And the degree of diligence that is required of you is extraordinary diligence. No, this is the diligence required for one who is engaged in what we call common career. Now you may ask, what is extraordinary diligence? Well, it is not just an ordinary diligence. You have to be extra careful in everything that you do. Why is that? Well, because if you are transporting people, we are talking about lives. If you are transporting things, we are talking about things that are of sentimental value. So you also have to be very careful. And if you are transporting news, of course, those news will have relevance or importance. No? Okay? So that is what we call the common career. Now, one who is engaged, habitually engaged. No? Habitually engaged in the business of transporting people, things, and news. Now, how about a private carrier? Well, I told you, a private carrier is something that is private, no? And being private, what is the diligence required to be exercised by a private carrier? Well, only ordinary diligence. This is the diligence required for one who is a private carrier. Now, someday, somehow, you may be engaged in common carrier, in the business of carrying passengers. So remember that the diligence required for a common carrier is extraordinary diligence. Now we talk about the different government offices. Different government offices involved in the business of common carrier. The first is what we call the Department of Transportation. No? It used to be Department of Transportation and Communications. Now it is only Department of Transportation. Now, DOT is the central, no? It is the central government agency that is in charge of overseeing the affairs of the transportation industry. No, Department of Transportation. Now we have the LTO, which is what we call Land Transportation Office. And what does this do? Well, for registration of vehicles. Registration of vehicles. Now, we talk about LTFRB. You always hear this, no? Land Transportation Franchising Regulatory Board. This one is in charge of issuing franchises. Franchises of what? Of common carriers, no? Of common carriers. They are the ones involved for, of course, franchises for land, no? For land. Now, how about what we call the fourth is what we call the marina. What is marina? Marina, Maritime Industry Authority. No, Maritime Industry Authority. And what does this do? Well, of course, because of maritime, it is in charge of the licensing and regulation requirements of those that are involved in the sea vessel industry. Okay? Anything na mayroong has something to do with sea vessels, it is the marina that is in charge of that. And then we have the ATO. What is the ATO? Air Transportation Office. Air Transportation Office. Now, the ATO has been renamed, I think, to what we call the CAAP, Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. And this one, they are in charge in the regulation of the air industry, air traffic industry, no? The civil aviation Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. Then we have, what else? We have number 6, we have what we call the PPA, no? PPA, the Philippine Ports Authority. And when we talk of the PPA, of course, because of this word ports, we are talking about seaports, no? Seaports. For airports, of course, they are also independent, like the NAIA, Ninoy Aquino International Airport. We have the Clark International Airport. No, these are all independent corporations, government corporations that are in charge in airports, no, in the maintenance of our airports. Okay, so I think that is all for today about common carriers. Common carriers, when we talk of common carriers, we are talking about transporting, no, passengers, things, and news from one place to another, and the degree of diligence required to be exercised by a common carrier is extraordinary diligence. Now, if it has been found out that you did not exercise the proper diligence required of you, then you will be accountable for the loss or damage of your clients. Okay, so I think this is all for today. Good afternoon, everyone.